Hello, Leo rising to your 2025 yearly forecast. From my mind, my opinions, my viewpoint, I'll talk about some things here in the year, some narratives, some storylines for you to pay attention to. I will start off the video here by saying that there is something in your world right now that might feel isolating. And this has to do with the theme here of isolation and rehabilitation and feeling alone. And in the beginning of the year, the planet Mars that deals with action, initiating, showing one's will in the world, already at the end of 2024, in the first week of January, is in the sign of Leo, your sign. And you would think that Mars being there, wanting to express its will through your creative, beautiful light that you have, that it would be running on all cylinders. But it's not, because that planet Mars is retrograde, which means it's moving backwards and going through a review, revamping, and redefinition period for months. And you're affected by this, okay? And I'm going to finish on that thought here. I'm going to tie something in for you. On January 6th, that planet Mars leaves your sign. You might feel relief sort of with this one. Technically leaves your sign and goes to the sign before you, Cancer, where it's starting to rework and redefine a more emotional realm of things, the feelings place. That specifically affects the world in your life that deals with how you stand alone and what you do in rehabilitation places, feeling the need to separate, feeling the need, sometimes when you say the word rehabilitation, you think of rehab, right? And there's different ways of rehabbing. People go to a retreat, a workshop, or they stop being social and they have to disappear into their cave and they have to contemplate things and become isolated. And you're alone, and people do this in many different forms, whether they initiate it or they find themselves there, right? And that is the vibe that goes around here for you from January, and I think all the way into mid-April. And it's in mid-April, the 17th and 18th, where at that point, Mars won't be moving backwards anymore, but it will leave that sign of Cancer and go right back into your sign for 2 months for the rest of spring. And it's there where I think you start to feel like you come out of the cave at least a little bit, and you start to get your bearings. I think we want to do things in a healthy way, by the way, when it comes to isolation and so on and so forth. But the inaction action point of view is pretty much under review in the first couple months of the year. I think this is very important because it will lead to something that will initiate and start for you in June, and I'll get to that. I think February is an interesting month. It always will be for Leo people. The reason is because your opposite sign Aquarius starts their birthdays, and that means your opposite sign is in play with you, the opposite of you. And I'll talk about 2 important dates around that time. One of them has to do with February 5th, because that is the day that the planet Jupiter, the planet that deals with expanding and abundance and hope and faith and optimism, wants to push out something I think you really like to do. It has the feeling of finally moving forward. It was going backwards since the end of 2024 in the sign of Gemini, and this affects the place in your world that deals with who your crew is, who your friends are, who your alliances are, your patrons, what community groups that you're a part of, and how they support your hopes, wishes, and dreams. And that might not have been running on all cylinders here at the end of 2024. As a matter of fact, I think all of that has been up for review for you. And it's in the first week of February where symbolically Jupiter starts to move forward, and the sociability might start to move forward very slowly. I don't think it's until the end of April where you, like I said, you feel like you come out of a cave with some of this stuff. I think it's important to note the Jupiter thing. That moving forward with Jupiter happens from February all the way to the beginning of June. Now, in the springtime, or before I go there, I want to give you a couple important dates here. And this has to do with new and full moon in your sign. It's on February 12th here that there will be a full moon in Leo at 24 degrees. This is a rambunctious, unpredictable full moon for you. It's going to test you. It's going to test the way you communicate. And I also think in one sense, it's going to come and and deal with a place that has to do in your career sector too. So this will affect who you are and how you show yourself in the world, even if you feel like you've been hiding out, right? But there's something from the career end, whether it's a boss or authoritative place. It has to do with your reputation, which I know is a big deal for you. Your social status. There's a surprise that comes, and it could throw you off kilter on that full moon on February 12th in your sign. The other big lunation of the year I want you to pay attention to is on July 24th, around the Leo birthdays, when the Leo new moon happens on that day. And I think it's a much more flowing, somewhat different full moon than the springtime or new moon. But there's one thing about it. Mercury, the planet of communication, how you conduct your ideas, thoughts, and opinions in your head, now it comes out, right, will be in Leo during that new moon in July 24th, but it will be going retrograde backwards. You have a story awaiting you, and I think this will actually do with how you express yourself, how you communicate, but I think you got a little bit of a backup around that time. I think at that point, the feeling of being in the cave kind of thing, you kind of actually enjoy, or, you're not hiding out anymore. Plus, for those in the Northern Hemisphere, it's summertime and so on and so forth. I just want to mention those two lunations for you. Okay, so let's get into the eclipses. Speaking of lunations, let's get into the eclipses that happen in March into April. These are the one on March 13th is symbolic because it deals with how you deal with your own personal resources and money. And this will be a theme here from 2025 into 2026, is how you approach money, how you approach your own resources and the creation of your own resources, and down the line, how you're connected to others and the resources that you have together or that you need from them for them to support you in, creating resources. But eventually we create resources to support our dreams, hopes, and aspirations, right? And to survive. So the eclipses, the one will happen in Virgo on March 13th, hits your money house. They're going to have another one in that area on September 21st. So you see a theme here throughout the whole year. You're going to have to totally rework the way you deal and engage with resources and money and so on and so forth. I would be conservative this year when it comes to your spending habits, honestly. And then another big eclipse that happens will be on September 7th and in Pisces. That also deals with, they go hand in hand, the own creation of your own resources and money. And on the other side of it is things that you're tied in with other people resource-wise. It also can mean the IRS, taxes, inheritances, stuff like this. These are tied into each other. We want to be conservative. My opinion. Okay, so speaking in springtime, during this whole eclipse run, during March into April, okay, the planet Venus that deals with resources and money and love and relationships and the feminine, it is going to be in the sign of Aries and stop and go backwards eventually to the sign before it, okay? And the sign before it has to do, Pisces, it connects to the part of your chart where eclipses will be happening this year, where you're dealing with money, etc., and legacies and all types of things where you're tied in with other people and other resources outside of your own. And this just so happens to think, if you think about this, if you're in the United States, that the March and the April happens to be tax time, by the way. So I really want you to pay attention to stuff like this. Contracts that you've signed in the past, certain things like this will be in the play. You'll get a chance here to get a little bit of relief from this place certain parts of the year. Reason is because when Aries starts its backward, or Venus goes its backward motion in Aries, that part of your world deals with like your highest truth and what you believe in. And I think that's a little theme here in the year of like what you stand upon truth-wise, what's your philosophical code, etc., etc. It's not just Venus is going to go backwards during eclipse time. It's going to be Mercury too. It's going to go from Aries to Pisces and affect your money houses. So that is pretty much the main theme. There's some other things there, but I want you to concentrate on that. Two big planets in the astrology world, Neptune, which has been in the sign of Pisces for more than a decade now, right, is going to leave that place that deals with your tied in assets with other people, taxes. This is also a death and inheritance type of place, a losses place. It's been working a long, deep story there for more than a decade. It's going to leave that area briefly, okay, on March 30th, and will enter the sign of Aries and bring a interesting new vision that deals with what you believe in, what your philosophical code is. But that's not the only planet that's going to do that. Saturn, which has been in the sign of Pisces for the last 2 years, in your money, shared assets, losses house, you see how much activity is happening over there, is going to leave at the end of May, and you're going to feel like you get a break from that, right? And so those two planets leave, and then they go through the summertime, but eventually in the fall, they stop and go back in to affect your money houses and this place where you'll have to clean up a couple of the things at the end of the year. Sometimes there are losses with reality, right? Again, I really want you to pay attention, engage in your life, how you create. In what ways do you hold and create your own money and resources? And in what other ways are you connected to? Is it the bank? Is it an uncle? Is it a loss of something? Is it something that happens that you have to pay the consequences for, right? Those types of things, I think they're floating around this year and you can't get away from it. And if it's something that you've been avoided, let's say you've been in fear of like not looking at a bill that you've had to deal with, right? Or there's a collection that you have to deal with, or there's something hovering over your head, there's a lawyer's involved, something like this, you can't run away from it this year. Face it head on, okay? That's my little secret for you. All right. So I think the fall, connected to the springtime, where I started talking about the story, it's the fall in September where this is going to come back and tie into spring. All right. Now, here comes June, okay? I mentioned something earlier. You know, the beginning of this forecast, that planet Mars is, was moving backwards in your sign and then moving into another sign that has to deal with isolation and rehabilitation. It's here, though, in June, where the planet Jupiter leaves your community house, your place of friends and patrons and all that, and did its magic for a year. And I think you'll get something here by June. I think there's a little bit of help that comes to you from friends and the communities that you're part of, or a new community, a new group of people come and support you. In June, that leaves and moves into this place that deals with isolation and rehabilitation. But I think at this point, it isn't a bad thing, or how it might feel in the beginning of the year. I think you've learned some lessons. And I think this isn't separate. You might be alone and isolated, but maybe you realize the benefits of that, where you at times need to do those types of things to gauge your world. And I'm not talking about the mundane money things I was talking about earlier. I'm talking about like why you're around and what your code do you live by is, you know? Some people it's a spiritual thing, right? Some people it's like a mantra, right? But sometimes, when things are unfortunate or feel that way, we have to go to a place to contemplate it all and heal it all. And I think on that deeper way, that's a theme that's going to start for you here in June and last for about a year. When you get to 2026 summertime in the Northern Hemisphere, or winter and whatever, you Leos 2026 summertime are going to explode into the world. And that is for the next forecast. There's just a lot of things that need to be tied up and meditated on. And a lot of times we do that by going through the metaphorical closets and basements in our world, physically or internally. And we have to clear stuff out. Okay? So, saying that, in July, and this there's a planet, another planet that's going to move forward just for a little bit, then move back, and that planet is Uranus, the planet of rebellion, shock and awe, surprise, liberation in the end. It's an unorthodox planet the way it works. It's always wanting to bring something new and disrupt what has been entrenched and solid for a while. And there's reasons for this, right? So it is entering the sign of Gemini and actually trying to bring something new in your community friends place that I mentioned earlier. So if in the beginning of this year you were accessing that place and working it like you do, which you should, if you're gonna see anything that's gonna be feel good or benefits, it's gonna be in the place in your world that deals with those who support you as friends and your alliances that you have, and you get a little bit of a good jolt here in the middle of the year. So I like this, but it's only brief. It's only brief because this planet Uranus will then go back and go right back into your career house where it's been since 2018, and you have a couple other things to figure and clean out there. There might be a surprise or two, or with your job, your boss, or a certain thing that you've had in play for yourself to show yourself, how your reputation shows up, what you've learned over the years, the achievements that you've done or you want to make. There's a couple more tweaks that are going to happen, and that happens till the end of the year. You could see here now that there's a bunch of planets here that move forward and then go back, right? And this is something you have to understand about ebb and flow. So if you feel like you need to focus on a couple things where you feel like there's progress, there slowly, I'm going to say is you focus on those money houses and shared resources houses, right? I mentioned earlier. I'm also going to say those who have your back, your friends, your crew, the alliances, new ones you've been thinking about being involved in. I would go access. And if you can get to something else that's even deeper, how does it feel to be alone? And I know you could do this, but there's times where a Leo needs to engage and be social and show its fiery world and light and expression, right? But what happens when you can't? What do you do in those places? And that is a true test for you, I think, this year. I'm not saying you're going to be hiding in a cave all year, but it's not going to be running on all cylinders like you used to, okay? But there's gold waiting for you here in contemplation, in the alone place. So if you're going to be in isolation or a rehabilitative place, you might as well make that your temple and your throne to thrive in. Because down the line, it's going to back you up in 2026, right? So saying that, I want to thank you for listening to my opinions about all this. If you're new here, my name is Nicolas Polimenakos, Sparkles of Gold. Hit the subscribe button, support the channel, hit the bell so you know when I go live, because I do a lot of live streams. I have a great community that shows up. We talk about all things. I take phone calls sometimes, etc. If you want a more detailed discussion with me one-on-one, I do sessions and readings. Go to sparklesofgold.com or go down here in the copy. You'll see all my links. You can take a look at my calendar and book with me. My Leos, man, we're going to see you shine. You got to work some things out, but I support you, etc., etc. Thanks for watching.